All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're unpacking an absolutely epic chronological journey straight from the historical source texts. We're looking at the life of Prophet Ishmael. This is a story of immense trials, unwavering conviction, and, quite literally, the foundations of a faith practiced by billions of people today. So whether you already know the broad strokes or you're coming to this history with fresh eyes, we are going to break down the incredible human drama behind the origins of these ancient traditions.
I mean, think about it for a second. How exactly did a completely barren, lifeless valley become the bustling spiritual center of a global faith? To really get the dramatic stakes here, we have to drop ourselves immediately into the harsh, isolated deserts of the Arabian Peninsula. There's no civilization here, no water, just empty, unforgiving sand and stone. And, that is exactly where our timeline begins.
So, Chapter 1, Journey to the Barren Valley. This is where a truly profound test of faith begins. The source texts tell us that Prophet Ibrahim, who, remember, was blessed with this son in his old age, was commanded to take his wife Hagar and his newborn Ishmael to an absolutely desolate area. Just picture the sheer desperation of this moment for a second. Ibrahim helps Hagar dismount under a lone tree. He hands her nothing but a leather pouch of dates and a small water skin. And then, he just mounts his steed to leave. Imagine the profound isolation you'd feel. You are left in an area with zero signs of human life or cultivation, and your supplies are incredibly, terrifyingly finite.
Naturally, Hagar is completely perplexed. She's running after Ibrahim, calling out to him repeatedly, but he just remains silent, heavy-hearted. Finally, Hagar stops and asks, "Has Allah ordered you to do so?" When Ibrahim says yes, her response is immediate. She says, "Then he will not neglect us." Wow, that brilliantly illustrates her rock-solid, unwavering faith in the face of what looks like total abandonment.
Moving right along to Chapter 2, the miracle of Zamzam. Okay, so those meager provisions, they run out fast, plunging them into a literal life or death crisis. The baby is crying from hunger and thirst, and in a state of absolute frantic panic, Hagar runs back and forth, climbing between the two surrounding mountains. 7 times. She makes this grueling, exhausting trek a total of 7 times, desperately scanning the empty horizon for a caravan, a well, literally anyone who could help. And here's why this is absolutely crucial today. This wasn't just a fleeting event in history, it became a foundational practice. It's the origin of Sa'i. Every single year, millions of modern pilgrims travel to Mecca to reenact this exact moment, walking between those same 2 mountains, mirroring Hagar's desperate search for salvation. So after her 7th run, the text tells us she suddenly hears a voice. To her total astonishment, she spots an angel at the site of what we now call Zamzam. The angel digs into the earth with his heel or his wing, and water miraculously begins to gush right out of the dry, barren ground. The tension finally breaks. Hagar is overwhelmed with relief, right? Salvation has literally sprung from the earth. Now, this next detail is actually fascinating. Hagar immediately runs to the water and fashions a basin-like structure so she can fill her water skin. In fact, a famous hadith by Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, notes that had she not tried to scoop and control the water, the Zamzam would have been a massive stream flowing on the surface of the earth. She literally built a basin to contain a miracle. And that single source of water completely changed the course of history for the region. A passing group of people from the tribe of Jurham spotted a bird circling in the distance. And since birds only circle where there's water, they sent messengers out to investigate. They discovered Hagar and Ishmael at the Zamzam, asked for permission to stay, and eventually settled down right there. This totally barren valley suddenly became a community. It's here that Ishmael grew up, learned Arabic from the Jurham tribe, and eventually married into it. Which brings us to Chapter 3, the ultimate test of faith. Fast forward a bit. Years later, Ibrahim returns to visit his son, who is matured enough to work alongside his father. But Ibrahim is carrying this incredibly heavy burden of a recurring, terrifying dream. The text recounts this seemingly impossible exchange. Ibrahim says to his beloved firstborn son, "My son, I see in my dream that I am slaughtering you. So consider what you think." And Ishmael's response? It's just a stunning testament to his submission. He says, "O my father, do that which you are commanded. You shall find me of the patient ones." Can you even imagine that conversation? It is an unimaginable test for an old father, and just an extraordinary display of obedience from a son.
Prophet Ibrahim asks Ishmael to travel with him to Mount Arafat to fulfill this command. But along the way, the historical sources tell us that Shaitan, or Satan, tried to intercept and seduce Ibrahim into abandoning his mission. Not once, but on 3 separate occasions. Ibrahim resisted these intense temptations by throwing 7 pebbles at each of these 3 locations, Jamarat al-Ula, Jamarat al-Wusta, and Jamarat al-Kubra, driving the temptation away every single time.
When they finally prepare for the acts, Ishmael makes these truly heartbreaking requests. He asks his father to tie him down well so he doesn't toss and turn. He tells him to protect his dress from blood so as not to grieve his mother. He asks him to sharpen the knife to make it fast. And perhaps most poignantly, he asks to be laid face down, in prostration. Actually, scratch that. It wasn't just a symbol of submission. It was a highly practical request, so that his father wouldn't have to look into his eyes and lose his resolve. But then, just as Ibrahim proves his complete submission and prepares to fulfill the command, a divine voice calls out. The ultimate test was passed. The text tells us that Allah ransomed Ishmael with a mighty sacrifice, a ram, sparing Ishmael's life and declaring, "Thus do we reward the good doers." It's just a moment of sheer triumphant relief. And just like before, we see how this ancient history deeply anchors the present day. The actions of father and son on that day form the core obligatory rituals of the modern Hajj. Today, millions of pilgrims mirror this exact triumph by stoning the Jamarat pillars to reject temptation and by slaughtering an animal to mark the completion of their pilgrimage. Let's pivot slightly to Chapter 4, the Parable of the Threshold.
So, sometime after the passing of Hagar, Ibrahim comes down to visit Ishmael, but he actually ends up meeting his son's wives instead. During his first visit, he meets the first wife. When he asks about their living conditions, she bitterly complains of hardship, misery, and destitution. But on a later visit, after Ishmael had remarried, Abraham meets the second wife. He asks the exact same question, but she is incredibly grateful, praising Allah for their prosperity and their abundance of meat and water. It's a night and day difference in how they viewed their life circumstances.
So, what does Ibrahim do? He doesn't even introduce himself. Instead, he basically leaves these brilliant and coded father-in-law messages. For the first wife, the message was, change the threshold of the gate. For the second, keep firm the threshold of your gate. When Ishmael got home and heard this, he immediately realized the old man was his father and caught on to the fact that the threshold was a metaphor for his spouses. Taking the hint, he divorced the first wife, who lacked gratitude, and kept the second, who appreciated their blessings. Finally, we hit Chapter 5, Building the Sacred House. Prophet Ibrahim visits Mecca once again and finds Ishmael seated under a tree near the Zamzam, sharpening his arrows. The dialogue during this reunion is just a beautiful display of unity. Ibrahim says, "O Ishmael, Allah has given me an order." And without missing a beat, Ishmael replies, "Do what your Lord has ordered you to do. I will help you." Ibrahim points to a hillock higher than the surrounding land and reveals the divine command. They are to build a house right there. Following that command, the father and son get straight to work. The historical texts paint this incredibly cinematic picture. Ishmael bringing the heavy stones, and Ibrahim actively building the walls. As the foundations of the Kaaba rise higher and higher, they work in perfect tandem. Just a father and son physically laboring to construct the sacred sanctuary. And the whole time they were handing stones back and forth, raising the walls of the Kaaba, both father and son were continually reciting this iconic prayer. Our Lord, accept this service from us. You are indeed the all-hearing, all-knowing. They weren't just putting up a physical structure, right? They were cementing their devotion into the very stones of the earth. And get this, today, the square stone that Ibrahim actually stood on to reach the higher walls still exists. It is preserved in an enclosure right next to the Kaaba, known as Maqam Ibrahim. And it bears the highly visible imprints of Prophet Ibrahim's feet. It's literally a physical anchor to this epic history. So, seeing the sheer impact of this father and son, going from a barren, lifeless desert to the epicenter of a global faith, it leaves us with a really profound question. What lasting legacy will your own faith and trials leave behind? Think on that for a bit, and thanks for joining me for this explainer.